Welcome everybody to our next installment of Village Art Insights, featuring Jessica here, our art therapist, of course, your co-host Rabbi Drew, and we are approaching Sukkot, the holiday of Sukkot.
Boy, time flew. We're back at it again.
Absolutely. And we're going to be talking about what you see behind us. We're not just leaving it as a prop for you to ask questions about. We're going to answer those questions. And what we have here is our submission from Majestic here at Cedar Village. It's the 9th year running, right?
10th, believe it or not. It's the 10th anniversary of the exhibit. I know.
Wow.
It's a big year.
Wow. So this is for the Mayerson JCC's Under One Roof exhibit, which every year they ask local, well, it could be individuals, but also institutions and organizations for their submissions to help decorate the art, the sukkah panels with various artistic pieces, right?
Absolutely. And this is our 10th year participating in it. We have been involved since the very beginning. I think we're one of the few organizations that has had the pleasure of doing that. So it's become a tradition here at Cedar Village. It's something that we do every summer. And come May every year, people say, when is it we're starting to work on our sukkah panel? And we have all the 9 from the past years displayed in the hallway here. So if you're ever here visiting and you're walking along the hallway between the CRCC and the garden dining room, you can view those panels. There's a brief description of each panel next to it, so you can stop by and read the description and learn a little bit about each year's artwork.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. And of course, we've a previous installment of Village Art Insights focused on previous year's submissions as well as specific submissions, especially last year's 9th submission from 2021. So this year it's a little bit different. And I know, Jessica, in our previous videos on the art submissions, typically there's a theme. Is there a theme this year for the Mayerson JCCs?
There is. We are, each year they give us a word or a phrase that we have to use as our inspiration for the piece. And this year the word was continuity, which was I feel like a bit of a heavy word, and I was very curious to know how our residents and artists here would react to that and bringing it back. Like, is this going to be a little deep, or how are they going to kind of come up with some imagery that would go along with this? But they took it in stride and rolled with it immediately. Like I said, we've got a group that has been doing this for years. Some of the people that participated this year have done it since the very beginning. So it's their 10th year as well. It is their 10th year. And then we had a few people join this year for the very first time. So we had about 20 people throughout the building working on this piece. I was going to say, that's continuity right there. That is continuity. There's the definition. It's a little meta. It's a little meta. Coming to fruition. I think a lot about this piece is a little bit meta when we get into it. Actually, when I had the fear that they really wouldn't get into the theme, it was the opposite. They took to it immediately, and the images just started flowing in the very first session. So I always start this process every year with a brainstorming session. We come in, we don't bring art materials, we literally just bring our brains, and I invite people that may not be artists but might just be thinkers to come to the group, and let's just contemplate this theme. What does it mean to you? What do you visualize? And we start from there. So in the very first session, I believe... It's great to hear about the process behind, not just seeing it, and it's like inside the artist studio. It is, and it's really exciting to share the process, because I don't often get to do that with people. You know, they get to see the work and they say, oh, it's really beautiful, but to know what actually went into the making of it, it's a lot of fun to share. That's great. So we started meeting at the end of July for the artwork. So we worked on this piece for about 6 weeks altogether. And in the very first session, I brought to them the booklet that we had gotten from the Mayerson JCC and shared it with them. And I thought, okay, we'll look at this and see what happens. And we talked about Sukkot. We talked about the meaning of Sukkot and what we do during that time, and I'll let you share a little bit about that before we get into the piece. Absolutely. So Sukkot this year will be taking place in October. Of course, on the Jewish calendar, it's always exactly the same. It's the middle of the month of Tishrei. It starts the 15th, and it goes for 7 days long. We have various biblical verses that talk about this, Leviticus 23 and Numbers 29. So it's scattered and elsewhere in the book of Deuteronomy. And it's the Hut Festival, the festival of booths, where the Jews commemorate being in the desert where God provided shelter for them. And you know, it's funny because a lot of, even certainly commandments, mitzvot,
don't really have reasons described as to why we are doing this, and even certain holidays don't even. The holiday of Shavuot does not necessarily have anything particularly attached to it, but for Sukkot, it's so that all the subsequent generations can remember that God helped cause us to dwell in huts on our journey from Egypt. So this is the holiday of Sukkot. Of course, it does, like many of the Jewish holidays, it is around harvest. So this is sort of not only the quintessential harvest festival, but it is the end. This is the end of all the harvest seasons for the entire year, a time for rejoicing, a time for kicking back, enjoying all the efforts of our labors throughout the year. Harvesting is done, we can celebrate. That is Sukkot. We just happen to be doing it outside, and here in Ohio, it may not be Israel, may not be the Middle East, but it still can be quite nice, even if sometimes it's rainy. So we'll see how this year's weather in Cincinnati in October holds up for us for Sukkot.
It's generally mild, but we always keep those ideas in mind when we're creating this because it might be hanging out in the rain for a couple of weeks.
Well, speaking of which, so one thing I noticed, and for any of our residents who can actually come and visit, or anybody watching this who's going to be visiting the exhibit, as opposed to years past, of course, there have been different materials for the previous 9 submissions, but
this one tried almost everything.
Is markedly different. It is a different material, and clearly, as you just mentioned, it seems like it'll stand up to the weather of Cincinnati in October.
Absolutely. We definitely kept that in mind. Yeah. Well, as we started thinking about the materials and as we started thinking about the imagery of this artwork, the idea of transitory dwellings and behind Sukkot actually, I think, came into play, and we talked about that before we started creating it, and how this nomadic element of movement. And so movement was a really big idea that our residents focused on when they were thinking originally about this piece. And I have some notes from the very first session when I introduced continuity to them.
Absolutely.
I always start naming some words and start thinking of colors and phrases. And the words that came out immediately were moving forward, on and on, flowing, extension, and then the first image that came out, the first visual, was a ship on an ocean. And I was really blown away by that because I thought that's a powerful image anyway. It's very symbolic, but they said, it represents this constant movement forward and continuity that we've had for centuries, long before we've traveled by car and bike and plane. We think of ships as an initial form of traveling the world and transitioning from one place to another, and they saw it as a symbol of continuity. I said, okay, let's go with it. And then this idea of flowing and the concept of the ocean being this ever-flowing, constant continuity, not only in our lives of water, but in the world, and that it connects people around the world through our oceans.
Is there, I almost wonder, of course, it can be a vehicle for transportation to help move the boat along, but I wonder if the ship, boat, also represents a certain precariousness, that there's a precariousness of the waters not only sinking, but even being buffeted by the winds and the way that the waves can affect it. And also, it's not linear. It's not necessarily directly forward. You could go in different directions. So I wonder, and I do have, okay, I'm going to pull my rabbinic card. Put my rabbinic hat on.
Please do.
That there is a notion with the holiday of Sukkot that there is an exposure to the elements. And that exposure to the elements, because part of the one of the aspects of Sukkot is that it's not a fully covered roof. It has to be able to have a lot of sun and to be able to still see stars. So there's a vulnerability to the elements. Exposure, right? And who knows what can happen, and we don't always have to feel so securely that we're dwelling in our homes, but that we can be vulnerable. And I wonder if that also is, I don't know that they had this in mind, I'm pulling from my rabbinic hat, but there is the precarious nature and being exposed to the elements with this.
I think it's a fascinating parallel that happens, and I see that in art therapy a lot, where the image it may not be a direct representation of something, but it does absolutely parallel feelings and ideas. And so I think you might be right on with that.
I also wonder if, you know, thinking about the ship, when we go forward in life, it's not as if we're like kids, how kids can have a train track or a car track and something just zips along forward and it cannot go any other direction except forward on this specific thing, versus a ship, it can go anywhere. And just like with life, it's not a track. Things can happen, not just being buffeted by the winds, but who knows, maybe you decide to go a different way. You want to go, you know, your own course. So I wonder if that's part of moving forward. It
definitely came up, and we talked about, okay, so let's say we're going with the idea of a ship. Before we committed to the image, what does that mean to each of you? And so I had a room full of 10 or 15 people, and they really just started to go with these ideas. One person shared...
Go with the flow, maybe?
They go with the flow, yeah. One person said, you know, we've all come here to Cedar Village from different places and different backgrounds, and had all these different experiences, yet we come here and we're now all in one place, forming a community together, and we have to find a way to be together on this ship. And I shared with everyone in the group, I started laughing when they said that, and I said, one of my very first memories when I started working here at Cedar Village about 10 years ago, I asked a resident, how would you describe this place to me? Tell me in like a sentence or two, what would you tell me about this place? They said, well, it's the best cruise ship I've ever been on. And I thought that was fascinating, and it stuck with me for all this time, because I said, wow, that's a really interesting image and description of what it's like to live at Cedar Village. Nice. So it is kind of reflective of that. Another person said, you know, yeah, we're all on this ship together. We have a common humanity, and we kind of find that within each other through working on these sorts of projects or through discussions with each other. We may think, oh, that person's not like me at all, but in talking with them, they realize that we're not so different after all. So as we then started to talk about materials and images, they said, well, we don't imagine just a cruise ship. We imagine an old vessel. You know, we're all a little old ourselves, and we want to have that representing time gone by and not just something new. So they initially just started describing a ship very much like what you see here. And I panicked because I thought, I cannot draw that. And I don't think anyone in the room can draw that. And so one person in the group suggested, well, why do we have to draw it? Aren't there a million pictures of boats like that out there that we could use?
Why would you create something new when you can bring forth some continuity?
Exactly. And so we discussed the idea of using a collage material for our work. And that is what led us to the creation behind us. They decided to layer different images together in a collage form versus painting, which is what we've done on most of our other panels in the past. We did have a couple that we used collage, so we went and revisited that aspect. I brought in lots of different images to the next group for them to choose from, and these were the images they selected. They selected a very subdued image of a world map behind to represent how we are all connected on the earth, and we're not just isolated. We function as this part of a greater whole. But they liked the lighter colors because they said it's soft. We don't want that to be the focus, yet we need it to be the background, and we want to have that in there somewhere. They selected this image of an old ship, a vessel of some sort, and chose, actually one person in the group said, well, every good ship needs a name, and I think this one needs to be called the Majestic because it's representative of where we are now and where we are moving forward as Majestic care of Cedar Village. So, wow, that's fascinating. So if you look really close in detail, on the bow of the ship is written the Majestic. Some other aspects of the design, they were very, very focused on the ocean because they said that is actually what holds us and carries us from one place to another. So we might all be on this ship together, but we're not going to go very far without an ocean. And so there was an interest in making it sparkly and shimmery because when this panel hangs outside for a few weeks and the sun hits it, it's one reason we're out here today, so you can see it in its true element. You see all these beautiful sparkling beads. So several weeks of this project were spent on stringing these beads together, and people sat in a group together, as many as 10 at a time, carefully selecting the colors of the beads, lining them up, stringing them together, and it became a really fun, unifying process. And as they were working, they said, you know, it's kind of like each person at Cedar Village is one of these little beads. And as we string together and we start to melt and come into this melting pot together, we become something new, and we're all connected. And I said, wow, that's really deep and really beautiful. Guys, you're really going there. So here we have our ocean holding up our ship. And they specifically liked the blue because they felt that it was a soft color, but yet positive. And also, they wanted to honor the anniversary of Israel.
Oh, nice.
In the artwork. And they had that in mind, and that is the roots of their Jewish faith. And so up here on top of the ship, we have an Israeli flag and an American flag, showing our connection between the two countries. All right, wow, you guys really thought of everything. So the process of putting this together, and you mentioned before, and I see you touching, I love it, because everybody wants to touch it, and it is made to be touched. There are actually, if you look closely,
unlike a painting.
We'll try, yes. This one I encourage touching. Don't pull on it, but definitely touch it. They wanted it to have a texture, and so we explored many different materials that we thought would work for the sails on the boat. So from a distance, you may not be able to see this. We'll try to get a closer view in a moment with the camera, but there is actually tulle that is attached as sails because they wanted it to have a texture and a feeling, something that was billowing in the air. And so it actually, you can see it really well from the side, that it kind of pillows out a little bit here, and just adds a very soft and subtle texture to the artwork. The background and the ship are printed on vinyl, and so it's we had it printed on a large vinyl sticker because we were trying to figure out the best way to transfer these images. And I recalled in years past when I transferred a vinyl image onto my son's wall in a place that I rented, and it came back to me that that worked really well. And so when Rabbi was referring to this, seems like it'll hold up very well in the weather. Well, I'm hoping it will. It's actually a plastic that it's printed on, and so it should hold up very, very well. We did have a little bit of challenge in thinking about, well, what if it starts to peel off? And so one person suggested stapling. So we put a few staples on, and they looked a little out of place. So we added a few more, and we added a few more, and eventually the staples became a thread that looks like hand stitching all around the edge. So it became a decorative and design element rather than just function. So it's fun when form meets function in these sorts of things. Another detail that I will point out is the quote at the bottom. So we took a long time to think about that and think about, we wanted it to have some sort of words. The residents kept saying, we want to have a description in some way, but we don't want it to be too obvious. We're not really sure where to go. So I did some research and found a few different quotes on continuity, and thinking about how they initially described this as reflective of how their lives have come together, and they each come at this from a different place. I ran across a few quotes, and one immediately was chosen and stood out by an author named Oliver Sacks. He's a British neurologist and has written a lot about brain development and human relationships. And so this quote, they felt like really summed up exactly what they were talking about. And it's led quite a few people to say, wow, I really need to look into this person's work a little bit more. But I'll read it to you. It says, we have, each of us, a life story, an inner narrative whose continuity, whose sense is our lives. And so they felt that was very reflective of each person comes here with a different story to tell, and yet their stories all come together in this place that we call Cedar Village. There's a continuity to their lives that goes on here.
Thank you, Jessica. It's really fascinating that Dr. Sacks himself was a Jew, and although he passed away 7 years ago, his writings, of course, and his teachings still live on with us, including, of course, this wonderful quote.
And he really specialized, like I said, in neurological development and studying dementia, studying how our brains change, but how our lives continue and how we continue to relate to others despite our deficits. And I thought that was really beautiful and very poignant.
Going back to what you were saying, Jessica, you said you printed these off, so you didn't find them. How did you go about printing them? How did you find them and then print them off? Because this is not something you just put paper in a printer and print. So how'd you do this?
No. So Google was my friend during searches for this and finding free images online. So printing out as many different free images of maps as I could find and free images of boats that I could find, clip art. Adjusting them, I had to rotate the image a little bit. I happened to use Photoshop quite well. So to find the direction that we were looking for. And then, yeah, just laying those out and presenting them to the residents. Once an image was chosen, it was actually very easy to print it. It might be something that you want to know. You can print poster-size images at any of your local pharmacies that have photo printing companies.
Really?
So, for instance,
vinyl?
Yes, on posters. And then if you ask for the adhesive option, it comes on vinyl. So there you go.
Whoa.
Something good to know in the past, because I had learned this years ago when I did an artwork for my son's room, but we rented and I couldn't paint on the wall, so I had it printed on vinyl and attached it. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It works out really well.
Learn something new every day.
It pays to know. So this, we're really excited to share this artwork with you, not only here at Cedar Village. Eventually it will come back here and hang on our walls in our gallery, and I really look forward to that, because I know there's lots of people that are excited at sharing it with their families. But in the meantime, it will be hanging at the Under One Roof exhibit starting on October 9th through October 20th, I believe, at the JCC. And you're welcome to pop in, have lunch, have dinner, enjoy the artwork. We'll be alongside lots of other organizations and individuals that will have their art represented there. And we'll be taking a few of the residents over to see the exhibit as well. So it should be a really nice time and something to look forward to.
Jessica, this is really fantastic. It's fascinating, and I'm sure for anybody who sees this, and I would, like you said, I would recommend anybody who sees this, yes, it looks nice on camera. It's even better in person. Of course, as Jessica was mentioning, you can even, it's really fun to touch. It's meant for the tactile experience. So this is definitely something not only to see, but to feel as well.
To experience. All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us for our, I don't know what number we're up to, 11th, 12th installment of Village Arts Insights. And I just want to mention that all Jewish life and programming here at Majestic Care of Cedar Village are through the sponsorship, the support of Jewish Home of Cincinnati. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.